Okay, recording has started.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February Office of Special Education Data Reporting monthly call. This morning, we have two guest presenters. We have Wendy Stevens and Kim Robinson that's going to be presenting about the employability credential coding. And then we have the bulk of our session this morning will be focused on the incident management reporting by Aveen Coleman. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk to you about some of the updates in our office. And next slide, Andrea. And then we'll get into the presentation. Okay. Just wanted to give you an update on the SUNS ID number and the merge records. I spoke with our state level Power School coordinator, and she's hoping to wrap that file up within the next week or so. It just turned into a much larger project than we anticipated, but she is working on that. And when she's done, she'll send it to the districts to do the near match and match resolutions, and then they'll have a time frame and when they need to get that file back to her, and then she will send it over to Frontline to do the final updating within the Frontline system behind the scenes. I do want to talk a little bit about process clarification as it pertains to the resident school and adult education. We know that the 991 school is a catch-all for all students who have never been in your Power School system. However, we do want you to enter those students, if they're school age, enter them into the school within their zone and code them as EEI. If the school is unknown or if you have a unique situation within your district, go ahead and drop them into that 991 school. But if they are a resident within your school attendance zone, go ahead and add them into that school in Power School as EEI. For the adult education students, we do need to see the withdrawal code from your school. Once you withdraw them to attend adult ed, you're going to turn around and then re-enroll them into the EEI school. I believe that's the way that's going to work. And then that should take care of that. So once you re-enroll them into that school, you're going to change the E for enrollment to EEI, and that should solidify the reporting for the dropout and graduation rate. So those students, when they're leaving your district to enroll into adult education, you need to withdraw them with the adult education code and then re-add them with an EEI code back into that same school. The official clarification or guidance for this will be released when all of the guidance for the merge record SUNS ID, it will be released as a part of that. But I know that districts actively have students that are leaving to attend adult education. So if you do, that is the process clarification for those adult ed students. Otherwise, you want to enroll those students into their resident zone school or school of their attendance zone as an EEI student, and that should solidify those particular processes. I do not have a lot of information for you as it pertains to the transition of systems. I can tell you that there is chatter of some time frame going on out in the field as it pertains to when you may possibly have to submit your final data reporting. I don't have a definitive answer for you just yet, but I can tell you that you will need to prepare to submit all of your reports earlier. So with that in mind, we do encourage you to participate in the systemic verification checks. That's going to give us some insight to any issues that may prevent you from submitting your reports at the appropriate time. We have requested that Frontline remove all of the barriers the critical areas that will prevent you from submitting your report to allow all instances to come through. The critical errors have been changed to warning, so we're still going to ask that you double check those things to make sure that it is correct before your final submission. As it also pertains to those final submissions, like I stated earlier, we do know that you will have to submit early. I can tell you that once the frontline system goes dark for the transition of the data, you will not be able to do any editing, only view within the system. So we're trying to get your data, help you get your data as clean as possible before that final submission. So as well as Indicator 14. I know that Indicator 14 was due last week, and there's still some districts that are having issues submitting those reports. We have requested that those critical errors be lifted so that we are able to obtain those your data. With that in mind, when you submit your data to us, those critical errors will be on our report, so we should know or have some insight to what the errors are that should allow us to continue on completing the final report. So that's all of the OSIS updates that I have for you. Next slide. Now we're going to turn it over to Wendy Stevens to present on the employability credential.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks for having me today. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, perfect. So I get to share with you all a little bit about the employability credential today, and you probably are all very aware of what this credential is and why it's really great for students. Me personally and professionally, I'm a huge fan of our credentials, seals, all of these things that help really celebrate our students and also give them a way to advocate for themselves. So I really share with you all, as I'm sure you have a desire to make sure the data is correct for this so that the students do receive their credentials, they have that. And then also, just for you all to celebrate your successes, that, like at the state level, when there are final counts for these, that those are accurate and all those sorts of things. So today, the main idea here is just not so much what it is. Kim Watkins is the expert on that, and many others in this room on this call, I'm sure. This first slide tells a little bit about it. I'm gonna kind of mostly focus on the PowerSchool data entry so that you can make sure that students are appropriately awarded. So it is for 12th grade students and beyond. So one thing that's unique about this credential that might be different if you talk to colleagues who are maybe coding other credentials that we might have, for this one, as we know, it might not be the case, the majority of the cases, but we may have students who are special education students who leave and then come back after 12th grade and may actually be able to achieve the requirements for this credential. And in some cases, it's even possible for them to earn this credential and then come back and actually earn a diploma later. So that it's a little different there. Those are not probably your most normal cases, but we do have to keep it, with data, we have to keep all the situations in mind that could occur. So anyway, that's why we point out here it's 12 and possibly beyond. And so that's looked at. So one of the fields in PowerSchool that we look at is going to be the true grade field. So if you have students who have something in true grade that is different than their grade level, that would be looked at because of two reasons. One, it could be one of those cases where the student is beyond 12th grade, but also it could be a student who might be served in 12th grade or beyond, but maybe at a school that doesn't typically serve that grade level, and so might not have it in their grade level, normal grade level field, so to speak, right? So we do look at that. Let's see, as you know, it's an alternative option for students with disabilities to demonstrate their ability to transition into the work community. So one thing that's really great about this, and I feel like you all, as leaders in this, in terms of championing this credential and what it means, I feel like one thing that's really great is that the fact that it is available to the students, not only as a paper credential, just like our diplomas, but also leading the way and doing something that we want really all of our, awards and diplomas over time eventually to be available to students, which is digitally. So that actually makes it even more accessible. So that's a really cool thing. Some of the students, at this point in time, we're kind of seeing an evolution in this. Some of them really love the digital aspect. Maybe some don't seem to care much about that right now, but they definitely are also going to have that paper award, of course, so that they can receive that as well. We know that that's important. And then the last bullet that you see here is that eligible students may earn one employability credential. And that's an important thing to point out. Again, if it can get a little confusing, if this is the only credential you're thinking about, you may think, well, of course. But I have learned that some folks may wear many hats. And so if you're having to think about this and seals of distinction and the seal of biliteracy and kind of keep all these things straight, it is important to know which ones you might have multiples of. And for this particular one, they would earn it once and then they would not earn this particular credential again. So that's just kind of good to know in terms of what the data would look like year over year. You wouldn't see the same student in one year's list and then see them again in the next year. If that happened, there might have been, that might need to be corrected. So great, thank you, Carolyn. So on the PowerSchool South Carolina student information page, you'll see a couple fields that are boxed here on the screen. So, and I will say this is we have some districts who are on what we call the new PowerSchool UI right now, and then we have probably most of our districts still on this UI. And if need be, I can send out information on how to do these clicks in the new UI. It's actually, in my opinion, not all that different, but it might feel different depending on your perspective. So basically what they need to do is get to the South Carolina student information page, which in the old UI you do by clicking on the state/province-SC. And then from there, they would click on South Carolina student information, again, in that old UI. It's actually probably fewer clicks than the new UI. All right, and next slide, that's going to show you what some of the fields look like on the page that would then appear. So on the page that appears, the first thing I want to point out is this postgraduate student email field that is actually in the 9th grade code section. And you might be thinking, why did they put it in that section? Well, number one, there's a lot of information on that page. So, sometimes sectioning things off is a little challenging, but that made sense as we were trying to choose where to put this because really we're encouraging districts and schools to go ahead and populate this postgraduate student email as soon as possible once the student enters high school, because you don't know what the student is going to do, right? The sky's the limit. They might be seeking an employability credential. They might be seeking something else, a diploma, some other credentials. They may need that in order to get those. So we say, go ahead, let's populate that. It can be changed later. They can, when they get their credentials, they can actually also merge that with like another email account. And, if they want to use a different one later, they can. But we just want to make sure that it can be issued. And the way that these are issued, it's through Parchment. And the email address serves as a unique identifier, but also serves as a way for the student to claim the credential digitally. Sometimes I get the question, well, can the paper be issued without it? No, we need it to issue any of that because all of that's done through Parchment. And so we need that to be populated. Otherwise, they might be in your final count. We might be able to say, well, yes, the student earned this, but they can't receive it. And we want to make sure they receive it. So let's go ahead and get that populated. And that the best thing for that is for it to be a personal email address for the student, or, if necessary, somebody who's working closely with the student, who might be helping them with that. I think it's typically best if it can be the students, but some districts start out by populating that with like a district or school email address and then change it later if the student so desires. So that's another approach. It really just depends on the district outlook in terms of how they approach getting that populated, but it does need to be populated. Okay, and let's go on to the next slide. We've got a few other fields to look at. So one thing that we learned, this credential is still fairly new in the grand scheme of things. So we've learned a lot in the first few years. That's always the case. And I think we're kind of settling into like, okay, we know how this works. And so we were able to tweak things a little bit to make it better in terms of making sure that the data is spot on the first time. We want to make sure that that's what we get if we can. So because of the different scenarios, and we sometimes call it like use cases of when students can earn this, and then, maybe they're 12th grade or beyond, we kind of realized that we really need to go ahead and get the date, this employability credential date that you see right in the middle of the screen here. So I'm jumping down to the second box that you see right away, as soon as you know that the student is seeking, because if OSIS reaches out and says, hey, we need to go ahead and get a list of who's seeking, or maybe early exiters, either way. But even just the seeking students, we want to make sure that we're narrowing that down as closely as possible to the ones who are seeking it for the given year. And that date field really helps. There are other clues that we have in PowerSchool, but because of, again, all the different situations that we could have, it's really helpful for us to get that information in PowerSchool. When are we expecting for them to earn that? So that's the employability credential date. So go ahead and fill that out as soon as you know that they're seeking it. Also, as soon as you know that they're seeking the credential, or as soon as districts, I'm saying you, but it might not be you who are here with us, it might be someone else. So whoever's coding it, once that information is available, hey, it might be a list of students from a coordinator. Let's go ahead and get the box checked for seeking employability credential for those students. Now, you'll notice that that field label also says for transcript. We sometimes get questions about that. Right now, the template that a lot of districts are using for the transcript does not automatically include the employability credential. And the reason for that is because that template, it's not actually a mandatory template, but it is used by many districts because it was rolled out a few years ago to make sure that requirements for the Commission for Higher Education were being met. And so those are the requirements that are fulfilled by that template. However, we do have a markup for the PowerSchool object report that generates transcripts that we can provide to districts and schools who would like to make sure that this is included for those students. So if they want to do that, they can reach out to me. Again, I will just say a transcript rollout, we have learned is a very big deal, and people, it is a big deal. It's a transcript. Anytime there's a change, there's room for error, frankly. And so we have not had another big rollout of a transcript template. Really, districts and schools can make their own transcripts, but many of them choose to use what the state puts out as a template or as a sample. And so we have not had a big rollout of that sample that a lot of folks are using, but we do have a markup that folks can request if they want to go ahead and layer that in for their students. So that is available. They can reach out to me. All right, the last thing is, as soon as you know that the student has earned it, they've met all the requirements, go ahead and put employability credential earned. And I think Kim Watkins has been amazing about sending out, making sure that some memos through OSIS get generated that have some good dates for you all for early exiters, and those should be received by districts soon for your early exiters for this year. I know last year we kind of had them all delivered at the end of the year. We're trying to do better at going ahead and getting those early exiters out sooner. It's just a handful usually for the early exiters for this one, but that's good to do. Most of them will be awarded at the end of the year, and then we might have a few over the summer. What will happen is the ones, much like with the diplomas, right? So the way that diplomas work is similar to, well, it's really just like, in many ways, the employability credential, in the sense that those paper documents have to make it to you before they are handed to students on a graduation ceremony date, of course. And so one thing that's really important is that we go ahead and have the seeking and the date fields checked, because we're actually going to do those orderings and the postgraduate student email. We're going to do those sort of pre-issuances, if you will, prior to when the student has earned it, because we don't have any other option. They wouldn't, we're talking about paper, right? So it has to be delivered in advance. And then if the student does not earn it, usually they do, but if you have a situation where something happens, life happens, the student doesn't meet all the requirements, just like with a diploma, that can be shredded or disposed of appropriately. And then on our end, we would see that in the data that it is not marked as earned. And so we would, basically undo that issuance. They would not receive an email or anything like that. And, so there wouldn't be anything like that where the student is seeing, oh, I received it. Oh, no, it's been revoked. They just wouldn't receive it. So that's just a really good thing to know. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I had one last thing for you all. Seeking, date, earned. Yep, that's it. So, one last thing. I didn't put it on this slide, but I always like to remind folks, of course, for this to be a credential that's awarded to students, this would be for students who would have the instructional setting of a special education instructional setting at this point in time. So, that's another thing that you would probably just want to check on in terms of all the data that's on the student information page. But in terms of what's actually being looked at to not just to validate, but to actually pull the list of awards, the ones that have here for you in this slide, are what we're looking at, right? So if they don't have the seeking and the date, you're not going to get that paper credential. And the same goes for the postgraduate student email. They need to have that. We could maybe put them in a count if they had just the seeking and the date, but we couldn't send you that paper credential. And then we can't do fulfill the issuance completely without actually knowing, yes, they earned it, right? So that's it. So in the end, it's pretty simple, but I hope that helps give you guys an idea of what to look for when you're checking data entry for this credential. All
Thank you
right.
so
Is there
much.
anything else in that?
Okay.
Any questions?
I've been following the chat, Wendy. Not too many questions in the chat about that. More centered around the SSI school. So thank you so very much for joining us this morning and providing this information. We are about to transition to the incident management overview with Aveen Coleman. Are you ready, Aveen? And did you want to take control of the slideshow or?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Carolyn. Yes, I'm going to take control because I do have to flip into PowerSchool to do the actual coding. So I did the take control, and what happened? I don't see the PowerPoint anymore. The PowerPoint disappeared.
Yeah, the PowerPoint's being shown on Andrea's screen.
Oh,
So
she
yeah,
didn't have it as.
yeah, if you want to just let her know when you want to show the PowerSchool,
Okay.
you can just share your screen at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Andrea, you may want to just go ahead and show your
Yeah.
screen again to get to the slides.
Do you see it? Maybe.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If you could put it in slide mode, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just tell you when I need to, it's in the presenters mode right
Yeah,
now.
Andrea, just go to display settings at the top and
Yeah, I did that. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invite on behalf of the OSIS data team. I'm going to give a brief incident management overview, and then I'm going to go into PowerSchool. Next slide. So just wanted to give you some updates. We have posted, it wasn't the 135th day, it's the 90th day. I didn't make that change, but we just posted your 90th day snapshot on February 7th. The 135th day snapshot will be posted on March 25th. Then we start a snapshot, which starts with the 135th day and some 180th day data on April 25th. I'll send an update to that PowerPoint, but we will post data once a month until May 8th through June 13th. We will post data every day during that time period. So right now, you should have the old data set. And if you make corrections along the way, the next time we'll post will be March 25th. And during that time, make corrections again along the way, then we'll post again on April 25th. The last day for our data collection on incident management is June 13th. Want to emphasize that that's a week earlier than most districts are used to, but we start posting data from May 8th through June 13th every day. So you have multiple opportunities to make corrections. The next document that I want to make sure that you have a copy of is the incident management guide. I will be referring to pages of that guide. The one that's online has the year 23. It's updated. So this is the link. When you get this link in your email, or we'll drop it into the chat right quick for you, you will be able to access the guide. And so when I reference pages, you will be able to mark those pages as well. So I did drop that link in the chat so that you can have the up-to-date version of the guide. So let's talk about incident management. There are some required fields when you're coding and incident management. I know that you may have a third-party software for your incident, but remember, the State Department only gathers information from incident management. So there must be a participant, meaning a offender. If there's a victim, please include that victim in the victim category. There must be a behavior, there must be action codes, the types of removals, the action date range, the duration code. If there are object codes, meaning that if it's a weapon, that must be included. If there's a subcode related to that incident, that must also be included. And in the incident element, in PowerSchool, you must have the action type. You must tell us what that removal type is, if it's a suspension, if it's ISS, if that student has been expelled from school, and that duration of that removal. And all of this must be associated to each student that's on that incident. Each student must have a behavior. Each student must have an action. They all must have duration codes. Next slide. So in incident management, the proper dropping of an incident, I use Chrome. Some people may use Mozilla Firefox, and that's fine. The only problem we have problems with is the Internet Explorer. You make sure that you have the offender, that's the student who actually had the incident. You take the behavior from the element and you drop that on the offender's name. And then on the action, you take the action and you drop that and drag and drop that on the behavior. And you should get the stair step. If you don't get the stair step process, that means you have not dropped that incident correctly. And you should receive error in level data if you're using level data. Most districts are. So if you see that you get an error with a misplaced action, this is why it wasn't dragged and dropped properly. Or you may have had just a behavior and no action. So it is required to have all three elements. Next slide. So remember, for incident management, we're reporting school grounds, school events, school transportation. I'm going to emphasize school transportation just for a minute. I do have a slide in here, but if there's an incident on the bus that's fighting, we still need the code of 009 fighting. If that student brought a weapon, we still need you to code the actual weapon. We can't just have you code just the code bus violation. We need what actually occurred on the bus. Bus violation can be there, but we need to know if it was a knife, if it was bullying. We need those specific codes because that's the only way we determine where that incident goes into our reporting bucket. I call them buckets because each reporting requires us to report something different. And when we're talking about school events, remember, school events mean football games, baseball games, basketball games, choir practice, anything that the school is hosting, that is considered school event, if it's that. So if you have a big fight there, if someone had a gun there, all those incidents are reported through incident management. Next slide. So these are our high-level reports: our Guns Free Schools Act, our Persistently Dangerous Schools Act, the UMaris Uniform Management Information Reporting System, discipline data reported for all state and federal reports. They all come through incident management. The school report card data, so when you look at your school report card and you see suspensions, expulsion, you see those high-level offenses, it all comes from incident management. If you do not code it here, we cannot report it there. If it's coded inaccurately there, we will be reporting it inaccurately there as well. And the reason why we give districts multiple opportunities throughout the year to correct their reports. Our first report posting was at the 45th day. The second, which was February 7th, was the 90th day. Then we start posting every month, March, April, and then we give you almost a month and a half between May and June to get the data corrected. So it's very important that when you're doing your Table 5 reporting for the Office of OSIS, that you're correcting all of those missing pieces that are needed for your federal reporting. Once we give that data over to the OSIS data team, there are no changes. We don't make changes because we've closed that year out, and we move on to all of the reporting. And we believe that we've given numerous opportunities for corrections. So let's talk about humorous. Humorous, you will see our 510, which is aggravated assault, 610, forcible sex, 640, homicide, the drug distribution, which is 570, drug usage, 575, 580, drug possession, 660, kidnapping, and 730, robbery. These are high-level codes. That means that most of these codes should have an SRO involved when you're reporting these codes. Aggravated assault has injury, and I have the definition from the federal guidelines of what that looks like. A homicide means that you've had a serious, someone died on your campus. We don't have many incidents of that. So we do contact school districts if we have that. Remember, a robbery is a true robbery where the SRO is involved, not someone taking candy, not someone taking something minor. It is a true robbery. So please make sure you're looking at the definitions in the manual as well. Next slide. So when we're talking about weapons, if there's a weapon found on campus, if there's a weapon found on a school bus, if there's a weapon found anywhere on that at one of those events, it must be reported. It's not an option to say, oh no, we're not going to report this. It is required. 789 is your behavioral code. Then you have to identify a subcode. And our subcodes for weapons is 780 other weapons, 781 handgun, 782 rifles / shotguns, and 783 other firearms. I'm going to stop on other firearms just for a little bit. That is what we call explosive, a projectile device. If you're coding that, that means someone has brought something that is a bomb to your school, or an actual projectile device that is not a fireworks. It is something serious, and really it should make the paper. So we want you to be careful and mindful and look at the definition as it relates to that pipe bomb. When you think of 783, think of a bomb, think of a serious incident that you should be calling SLED. Your SRO should be involved, not something like fireworks, because we have 010 for fireworks. That does not apply. Okay. 784 is for a knife, 2 inches. 785 is for 2.5. If there's anything below that, it is 786. 786 is for any knives below that. So let's talk about some of our bullying coding. This is required. It's required for the state, and it's also required for OCR reporting. So your 650, 651, and 652 are required coding for state reporting and federal reporting. And if you have those incidents, they must be reported. Just highlighting that we still code truancy. That applies to every student. 151, 152, 153. We include the intervention plan. Just a reminder, because your students are students being served, who have a disability, we ask that when they're creating those intervention plans, that they have someone from the special education department there to assist with the development of those intervention plans. The other piece is family court referrals and violation of court orders. As a reminder, 009 fighting is the most requested code that we get from data requests. Most of those students are suspended, so you'll see those numbers in your suspension numbers more, but it is the number one data request that we receive statewide. 0112 harassment is a required reporting code, and 260 bomb threats. Any bomb threats that's occurring in a school environment must be reported. Next slide. So let's talk about our guns just to make sure that everybody's clear. 781, 782 are guns. They are actual guns that have a firing pin. Our BB guns do not fall under this reporting. That is 780 for anything that's related as a BB gun. But 781, 782, they are true guns, okay? Want to make sure that is correct. Remember, we report the number of incidents with guns. We report how many guns were brought to school, the number of students who were expelled, and that includes your elementary, middle, and high schools. And it also requires us to look at students with disabilities to see how many of those students were received services and did not. So it's very important that if these students were expelled, we need to have that subcode expelled with services coded, because that's what should happen, or expelled with no services if that occurred. But expelled with services is what is the norm for students with disabilities. I know sometimes students are arrested and then they go to DJJ, but we have the code that's for arrest as well, if that occurred. But remember, when you possess a gun or a rifle, usually these students are recommended for expulsion. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about our persistently dangerous schools. You will see that our persistently dangerous schools and numerous reports pull kind of the same exact high-level offenses. Kim Smith in our office is our contact for the persistently dangerous schools report. It's the same 640 homicide, the 610 forcible sex, which is rape, 660 kidnapping and abduction, 510 aggravated assault, the 570 drug distribution, 575 the drug usage, the 580 drug possession, 730 robbery, and then all of the weapon offenses. So this is reported in two places. It's reported, well, really three. It's reported on the humorous report, which is our suspensions and expulsion report. And then it's reported on the PDS report. And then it's pulled for the school report card. So it is critical that you make sure that all of this information is accurate. Okay, so let's talk about incident management subcodes. There are 3 subcodes for hearings. There is the administrative hearing, there is an expulsion hearing, and then there's the hearing for those manifestation determination hearings. So if you have a manifestation hearing, that should be included on that incident. I want to make sure everybody understands all of the different subcodes. The administrative, that's just with the principal. The expulsion hearing, that means that we're with the hearing officer for that one. So, as we mentioned before, under expulsion, there are 2 subcodes. There's expelled, no services provided, and they're expelled with services. Because of your population, we're most likely to see most of your incidents expelled with services provided. But there are some cases where Traditional regular ed students will have expelled with services provided, because some districts do provide services for those students as well. Next slide. For your IDEA interim alternative educational setting, there are two subcodes. There's the HRO, removal by the hearing officer, and then there's the unilateral removal. If you want the definitions for this, I know that Carolyn and them go over this, but it's on page 35 of the Incident Management Guide. Please make sure you're reading the definitions when you're coding this. But if you have any of these incidents, you need to make sure that you're including the subcode and not just coding the IAES alone. There are two subcodes to make sure we're able to determine whether it was a hearing officer removal or that unilateral removal. Next slide.
Aveen, before you
Yes.
proceed, there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
one is, if there is a knife less than 2 inches, what is it coded?
It is coded as a 786. It's still under a weapon, but it's a 786.
And the second question is, should truancy be reported for all age students beginning with 5-year-old in kindergarten?
Truancy, really, when we're reporting truancy, we start with the age 6, because kindergartners, parents can actually sign their students out of kindergarten. They can sign a waiver at the beginning of the year to say that we're not going to go to a public school kindergarten. So we use September 1st as our cutoff date, meaning that the child must be 6 by September 1st in order for us to do truancy. Usually we ask districts to create a contract, an attendance contract. If you don't have that attendance contract, please check with your attendance supervisor and they will be able to provide you with a copy of that. We still must address attendance because they're in the school setting, but we usually do that through a contract. Any other questions, Carolyn, before we move in?
That's
Okay,
it.
thank you.
you.
No problem. So with the suspensions, remember there are multiple drop-down codes, subcodes when you're looking at a suspension. There is the in-school suspension with no services provided, which you really shouldn't have, based on your population. And then there's the ISS in-school suspension with services provided. You're out of school, no services provided. That means you're in your 1 through 10 days. Anything after 10, we should be seeing OSP, out of school services provided. Anything after 10 days, day 11, 12, 13, 14, because it merely states that once your student has hit that 10 days, day 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you must provide services. So if you're using that no services provided, Carolyn and them will definitely address that issue with your school district. But usually at day 11, we shouldn't be seeing no services provided. The next two codes is suspension pending expulsion. That means that this child is being referred to an expulsion hearing, meaning that they've been recommended for expulsion. Remember that SUX, pending expulsion, is not the final outcome on an incident. You must have a final outcome, and we'll go over that. The suspension pending parent conference. I remind districts, if you do not change this to a parent conference, this will count as a suspension. Remember, students cannot be suspended overnight. They can only be suspended during the instructional day. You can't send someone home with a slip and say they're suspended overnight. They can only be suspended during the instructional day. Meaning that if I sent you home midday for a behavioral incident, that is a suspension. That is not an absent, that's a suspension. Want to make sure that's very clear. The concurrent suspensions. That's when a student had one incident that morning, the principal didn't get to it. They may have had a second incident that afternoon, and they're going to do one action for both incidents. And we'll show you how to code that. And I have some instructions in here as well. So let's talk about final actions. When I see a SUX, suspension pending expulsion, or REX, recommended for expulsion, or a hearing, HRG, or the SP, pending conference, those are not final actions. I expect to see either expelled, no services provided, expelled, with services, EOX, which is an expulsion overturn. We've had a couple cases like that where the student went back on probation. ARR, meaning that the student was arrested. They did not come back to school because they are placed at DJJ. A referral to the alternative school. An alternative placement, which includes a drop down for home base. Conference, meaning there was a conference as the final outcome instead of an expulsion, or of course, or out of school suspensions with service or without, and probation. Please be reminded that you have to have a final outcome on the incident. It determines where we code that incident, whether we code that in your expulsion numbers, whether we code that in your OSS numbers, whether we code them in your arrest numbers. But please understand, if you do not put a final outcome, we do record them as a suspension if there's an SUX. We have to record that final outcome. But please make sure that you're doing this. We flag this in your reports, and it is also flagged in level data. Next slide. Next slide. Expelled with services. So when a student with an IEP is expelled with services, how does that look in coding? The attendance is still home base because they're still allowed to be in attendance as long as services is being provided. But in the behavior code, it must include the behavior, what they were expelled for, the action, all of the OSS days that were tied to that incident must remain. You can't just take them away because they are expelled. You must keep those OSS days as well. And then the final action should say expelled with services. And then you populate that duration. How long are they going to be expelled with these services? And then the key to all of this, services must be provided if you're adding this information in PowerSchool. Next slide. So I'm going to give a couple tips. I wanted to add a few tips before we move forward. All school removals must have duration codes. So what are duration codes? You see here where I'm pointing to the duration code. You must have a duration code. You must have an action date range on all of your incidents. You must have an assigned duration and an actual duration. So these things are right here for you to see. So if you don't have these things populated in level data in PowerSchool, you should receive an error. Next slide. Couple more coding tips. If you have an incident that's a 510, which is an aggravated assault, that means there was physical injury. Under this the participant's attribute, you should have selected physical injury, minor, major, or moderate, because you're telling us this incident was a 510, which is an aggravated assault, which tells me that someone was injured. Next slide. When you're coding an incident with a weapon, remember 789 is the behavior, then you must add an object. The object code either has to be the 780, other weapons, you know that's the catch-all for anything that's not gun related, like your tasers, things, BB guns, things like that, ice picks, razors, they fall under 780. But your handgun, 781, 782 is your rifle, 783, other firearms. Remember, put a note to yourself, explosives, you should be using that unless you have a bomb on campus. So please be reminded of that as well. And then we talk about the 784 for 2 inches, which is state reporting, 785, which is the 2.5, which is federal reporting, and 786 is anything less. Remember, we're measuring the blade of the knife to determine those inches as well. Next slide. Another coding tip, if you have an incident with a toy gun should not be under our weapons code. You must add another object code. Under that object code, you should select miscellaneous object, and you should put in the object code comment toy gun and add that as well, because that's not going to be reported in our high level offenses. Next slide. So we do have another category for discharge firearms. It can be used for handguns and rifles. So if we don't have many of these incidents, but it is a required reporting for OCR, but you may have an incident where something had happened at a football game and there was a discharged firearm. It must be reported. So we've had incidents where firearms have been discharged in the past. We don't have many of them. It's far and few, but we had to add a code to address that. This is just a reminder that if you have that incident, this is where it's coded. Next slide. Just a reminder with your action date, the period of time from the first day to the last day of the imposed consequence. For example, if that student was given a 3-day suspension on February 21st of 2024, the action range date should be 2/22/24 through 2/26/24. If that student was sent home on the 21st, that day should be included. But if they weren't sent home until the next day, it starts on the next day. And the resolution date is the 21st. Next slide. Assigned duration is the actual total number of days assigned, meaning how many days I'm going to be suspended. If it's going to be 5, that's the assigned duration. The actual duration is the total number of days the student served. So if it's 5 days that I'm going to be suspended, I should have 5 in the actual. But what happens when it's reduced? What happens if in some case you figured out that should be less than 5? You have to go back in to PowerSchool and update that. So you would leave the 5 in the assigned duration, and then you would go back and reduce the actual amount of time served. And when you reduce that, you will also need to reduce that use the drop down box to reduce that to 3 days as well. You would also need to go in to make sure the attendance is updated, that the student was only suspended for 3 days, and the attendance should reflect 3 days. And you would make sure the dates reflect 3 days. All of that must occur for this information to be accurate, because you reduce the amount of days that the student was actually being assigned the suspension. Next slide. When we're referring students to an alternative school program after that expulsion hearing, we need to make sure we're documenting that as well. All of the OSS days that was served prior to that referral must remain in the system. You can't remove them. You leave them in as OSS pending expulsion. The only difference is that the final outcome on this incident was that they were referred to the alternative school, and that should be on the incident. And you must populate the duration code on how long this student is going to be at the alternative school. If it's going to be over a certain period of time, you make sure that is included. Some other possible codings that you could have on an incident, because this is considered a change of placement for your students, you may have the manifestation determination hearing on this incident as well. You may also see recommended for expulsion, but remember that is not a final outcome. You may also see an expulsion hearing. Remember, that is not the final outcome. The final outcome has to be either referred to the alternative school, recommended for expulsion with services. Those are final outcomes. Sent back to home traditional school on probation. If you don't have those, that incident is not complete. Next slide. So what does that duration looks like? So should the district populate the date range and duration for referrals to the alternative school? I added this as a question. Yes, if the referral is for a set amount of time, and if it's more than 10 days, you would use more than 10 days. Remainder of the semester, you would use remainder of the semester. If it's for the remainder of the year, you would use remainder of the year. But that information should be described in that hearing letter that the hearing officer has sent to the alternative school as well as the homeschool. Remember, kids, alternative school is not a permanent placement. It is not a permanent placement. Kids should transition in, complete their time there, and transition back to their traditional school. It is not a permanent placement.
Evine, I have a question in the chat.
Yes.
Is there a difference in coding alternative school when it is a separate school in the district and when it is a separate place on campus of the homeschool?
No, it is not. That information, the way alternative schools are set up, they're supposed to be set up as a remote school, just like your Kate Center, where attendance and discipline writes back to the home school. Remember, alternative schools are programs. So all of the data regarding their attendance, their behavior, is reported back to the home school for that student. So it's very important that their setup in PowerSchool is correct, so that when we know that it's a alternative school based on the drop down in PowerSchool. When they have their own PowerSchool, well, really, it's a drop-down list, and if they select the alternative school name, we know it's an alternative school. But we know that the data must go back to the student's home school because they are a program and they do not get a report card. Okay? So that's the main reason. All data from the alternative school impacts the home school. So it's very important that they work together.
And the next question is, how should the coding after the hearing, how should the coding after the hearing and until the student's intake into the alternative school be coded? Should this be an OSS as well?
As I remind districts, after the hearing, there has to be a quicker transition for those students, because if we have the hearing on Thursday, usually by Monday, that student should be going through that orientation. If there is something in between that, we've given districts 2 days to use the hearing code. That's the day of the hearing and the day after, because it takes some time to get the transition. So it's very important that you work on your transition process of how long it takes a student to get to the alternative school, because in some cases those are unexcused absences and will be counted towards truancy. It depends on what's really going on. So we've given districts 2 days to use the hearing code. The day 1 for the hearing, day 2 for that transition.
Okay. And the last one is, do we know if this information has been shared with the Power School coordinators or supervisors?
I have shared this information last year. I share it in my training. I end the year with an update as well. I usually do a mid kind of check-in. I haven't done that yet. And this is some of the information, but I did share this last year. This is constantly shared every year. We do an annual incident management training for new folks. We do trainings throughout the year. They will get this update again soon. Hopefully in March, I'll have a mid-year check-in, and then in May, I'll have like what I call a closeout. So please share this PowerPoint when Carolyn sends it to you as well.
One other question just came in, and it says, so if the period after the hearing is longer than 2 days, we should use unexcused?
You need to determine what's going on. Is it unexcused because the student is not showing up? Because we have cases where they don't want to go to the alternative school. You have to look at your letter. Your letter should state when the student should be at the alternative school. So there are some key checkpoints. I can send you a list of questions that you need to make sure you're mindful. But if it's a case where the transportation is not set up properly at the school level, that is a school issue, not a student issue. But if it's a case where the student is refusing to go to the alternative school, that's an unexcused absence, because that becomes truancy. And then truancy should take place. So there's a couple different things that go on in the alternative school environment when students are referred. Please remind parents that they can appeal the referral, but they must be at the alternative school during that process. They can't just be home during that appeals process. Okay.
And one other question, Kim Lineberger asked a question earlier in the chat. The snapshots that you were referring to at the beginning of the presentation when you were talking about the location of the reporting, where could they obtain that information?
That information is in ADT. Your incident management coordinator for your school district has a copy of that, and they should be able to give you that information. It's in the advanced data transfer.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay,
all.
no problem. So let's talk about the concurrent suspension. What does that mean? That means that you enter the suspension on the incident of the highest offense, and write a note in the description regarding the other incident, meaning that I'm going to have 2 incidents on one day. I'm only going to give one action. So I'm going to find the highest incident, and that's where I'm going to put my action on. What you will do then you will include the incident number and note the consequence for the multiple incidents. And combine. So if I have a concurrent suspension on one incident, on the highest incident, that's where my suspension should be. I should not have 2 incidents with a suspension if it happened on the same day and you're giving the same consequence. That's why we use the concurrent suspension. So what happens if I had a student come in, they had an incident that morning, incident that afternoon, I didn't get to it till the next day. What you would then look at, the highest incident of that day, you're going to code both incidents. One, you're going to code as concurrent. You're going to make sure you include the incident number in which you included that suspension for that incident. It just helps so that you're not double coding a suspension for the same day or the same incidents. If I'm going to suspend you on, let's say, the 26th and 27th, for both of these incidents, only one incident should have the suspension of the 26th and 27th. The other incident should have the concurrent. But we have to code them both. I hope that is clear, and that's how we use the concurrent. And the concurrent suspension has a duration code because we know that you should be using it for in this process. But you have to make sure you use the concurrent suspension duration code. When we see that, it says to us, the student had 2 incidents on that day. They're going to be suspended on the highest level incident. And that incident should have the incident ID for the concurrent suspension. And the duration code should be on that highest incident. It is very clear. Highest incident, suspension. The other incident, concurrent suspension. Note that ID from the highest incident. And that's only going to be counted as one suspension for that student. If you code it the other way, it looks like 2 suspensions instead of 1. I know concurrent is not the fun one that we deal with, but it was necessary based on feedback from the school districts. And this is not something that is constant, but it is necessary.
Bean, there was one question that says, should the concurrent incidents have at the beginning and ending dates?
Yes. Yes. So, this is a quick scenario. I don't have any polls for you, but I would like for you to respond in the chat. Scenario 1. If a student receives a discipline referral and is sent home for the day by the principal or / assistant principal, how should this be coded in PowerSchool? Please answer by using the letters. Okay, I see some responses coming through the chat. So the answer is B, an OSS action code and an OSS in attendance. You cannot send students home for a disciplinary infraction and not code the incident. You have to give parents the notification that their child is being suspended for the remainder of the day. You can't say that they're taking an early day off. It is an OSS. So we're going to go into the second incident. We had 2 8th grade males Male students got into a serious fight in the hallway. Both students had scratches, and one student may have had a broken arm. How do you code that incident in PowerSchool? If you could answer in the chat as well. See a few answers coming in. Okay. That is correct. It is C. It is one incident of fighting with two students involved and the physical injury. And the physical injury for the broken arm is going to be major. Okay. That's a major injury because that means someone had to go to the hospital for that one. The scratches could be minor, but the broken arm is major. Okay. This is just instructions to make sure that you are very clear when we're coding fights. If you have two students involved in a fight at a high school, but one student attends another high school in your district, the incident is coded at the high school in which it occurred. It is coded as one incident. All participants are coded onto that incident. Make sure you assign the role of the offender. You may have two offenders. Sometimes you may have three offenders. Sometimes you might have 4, 5, 6. It may be a big fight. You may also have a victim, but please make sure you assign that role. Make sure that you code a behavior for each offender. Make sure you have an action coded for each behavior. And if they are from a different school, make sure you have that school attribute coded for that student. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint there, but this is the difference between a fight and an aggravated assault. I don't know why it crossed over, but we'll fix that when you get the final version. I always start with the aggravated assault language because it means that if it's an aggravated assault, there was physical violence, someone has lacerations, lost consciousness, possible internal injury. There's physical injury and someone had to go to the hospital. A fight where two students are just fighting in the hallway, you were able to break it up, no injuries, that's 009 fighting. What if it was a little bit aggressive, a little more aggressive? That's our simple assault code, but it's not the aggravated assault. Want to make sure that's clear as well. Next slide. Remember, when we're looking for a physical injury, it means that someone had to seek medical attention. Think of that someone had a concussion, fractured bones, cuts requiring stitches, stab, or bullet wounds. When we're talking about that physical injury for that high level offense as an aggravated assault, it is a high determination based on federal definition. Next slide. This is how that is coded. As I told you, you would select the attribute. This is on the student search screen in PowerSchool. Then you would select the school in which that student originally came from, because we've had incidents where students go to another campus. And you would select their school, and then you would select the physical injury, and then you would tell us if it's minor or major or moderate. Next slide. Remember, when we're looking at fights, I'm going to code one for you. Fighting, two students involved. You can't fight by yourself. So there should never be an incident where there's only one student on a fighting incident. If it's a fight, you have to have more than one student involved. If you have some other incidents like a drug distribution, something with aggravated assault, and it's more than one student involved, they should both be on the same incident. It's coded as one incident, two students fighting, and then you determine which action for each student will take place. Next slide. Also, just to give you some clarification on your bus suspensions, there are some subcodes for bus suspensions. There is the alternate transportation. That means the district is providing the transportation for those students. Then there's the alternate transportation, meaning the ATP, which is the parent has agreed to provide that transportation, or the district has contracted to provide that transportation. And then there's the NAT code, where the student is suspended from the bus and does not have an IEP that requires transportation. There are 3 subcodes. Please make sure you're following the instruction from the OSA staff on how to use them, but there are 3 subcodes for a bus suspension. When you have a bus incident, remember we discussed that there's the 340 bus violation. This is, that lets me know it happened on the bus. But guess what? I needed to know that this student also had a weapon. So I needed you to code the 781 handgun, which is an object code, which you see here in the elements. And then 789 is the behavior. Why do we have the behavior? Because you can't drop the final actions on an object code. You must drop the actions on a behavioral code. That's why we have the behavioral code of 789. And so you see here the call to law enforcement, and then the suspension pending expulsion. This is not a final outcome, but if the student is expelled, I'm supposed to go back in and update this. Next slide. Remember, we will post this information. If you don't know who your incident management coordinator is, usually it's someone dealing with the discipline in your district. Check with your student services director. If not, I have a list that is in DIMS, but we will post again on March 25th. Next slide. This is the report that we send to them. It is more detailed than this. They actually get the actual incident that's causing this error, but it has missing duration that tells us we don't know how long the student was suspended. Missing behavior, that means, okay, you have a student on the incident, but you didn't tell us why. What behavior was on that incident? You just added a student name in incident management, no behavior included. Invalid truancy incident, that means you have multiple students coded on one incident. For truancy, you can only be truant alone. Okay. Physical injury, that means you've coded an aggravated assault, but you have not included the physical injury. Invalid pending expulsion, a lot of those, 726, that means there's no final outcome on that incident. We don't know if the student was expelled. We don't know if the student was sent to the alternative school. We don't know if the student was sent back on probation. We need a final outcome. Missing corrective actions, we don't have too many of those. Invalid weapon type, that means you didn't tell us what object code. You didn't tell us if it was a knife, if it was a gun, and we have 105 of those. A warning incident element with that 1, that means someone has coded something serious that I need to check. That means I need to check if it was a kidnapping or homicide, and I need to follow up in writing with that district to say, hey, did this really happen, or did someone miscode this incident? And then missing location. The location, when an incident occurs, everyone must have a location on that incident, and we'll show you where that is. This is how many incidents we have so far, but as we move through, I will be coding a suspension pending expulsion, expel with services, expel without services, a bus suspension incident, updating a suspension duration, days, incident with an injury, and a concurrent suspension. those are the things that I am coding for you today. Any questions? Any questions before I pop over to PowerSchool and start coding some things?
There is one.
Yes.
It says, how are special education students identified on the incident management report? Is it pulled from the E4 coding or instructional setting?
We use both. If you look at the incident management report, it is the last report. It says behavior actions. That's the name of the tab. I didn't include that here, but the behavioral action tab is in that spreadsheet when your incident management coordinator gives it to you, and it lays out every incident for your entire district. And then it gives you race, demographics, information, and then it gives you two codes. It gives you the instructional setting code. One has a 0 and one has a 1. Students with a 1 are students who've been in special education. And then we include the EFA code just in case we didn't get the instructional setting populated. So it's very important that you do code the instructional setting because we have to pull two codes just to make sure. Okay, so that in the instructional setting, it's a 1, meaning that's a student with a disability. If it's a 0, that's how we code it. We don't code it all of the actual language that y'all have in the instructional setting. We're trying to determine, did the student have special education services? We're using more of that yes or no model. We use your instructional setting lists, but we come up with the 0 and 1 for that reporting, and then the EFA code. So we have them both in that report. If you have not seen that report yet, please get with your incident management coordinator so they can show you that report. It's very extensive.
One additional question says, what do we do if a student without a special education EPA code or instructional setting are on the list as 1?
If you do, I think I've received an email of that lately. I've sent that to the programmer to check that out.
And Aveen, I think they would need to also check to see if the student was dismissed from special education services, because for our Table 5 reporting, it is whether or not the student had a disability at the time of the incident.
And that is correct. We can't remove it if they had a disability during that time. But this one says they never had this SPED. So I need to send that to the programmer and do a follow-up on that one. Hopefully I have that email in my box. If not, please send it to this discipline@ed.sc.gov box.
That's all the questions.
That's all the questions. Are y'all
Yes.
ready to go into PowerSchool and code some things? Yes, no, maybe so. Aveen, you've been on too long. Okay. So
No, and while you transition, Aveen, I just want to
uh-huh.
ask a question, answer a question that was asked earlier. And no, you do not have, districts do not have to submit the Table 5 report, but we do want you to know all of the intricate steps that's involved in the Table 5 reporting, in the incident management reporting, so that when we pull the information, it is static. There is no additional opportunities to make corrections because it would have been finalized by Aveen's team already.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is turn my camera off because I have two screens in here. And when I am coding for incident management, I really, it's hard for me to focus with my screen on. So I'm going to need Carolyn and them to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Just say, hey, Veen, they could see it or not. So I'm turning my picture off so it doesn't look like I'm looking at three screens or looking away from you all. So I'm turning my camera off. And now I want to make sure that you can, which screen you're seeing.
I'm seeing your Explore
blue
screen.
screen,
Well,
right?
now you're back on Teams.
Okay, so let me switch.
I see your Power School.
Okay, great. Because I never know with these screens, all these screens that you have in this office, sometimes it'll go a little haywire. Remember the guide. Don't forget the guide. That is one thing here. So what we're going to do is code an incident. And I'm going to pick a high school to code an incident to. And hopefully you can see here. I start with incident management. This is the older version. I will be working on updating the guide to the newer version. So I was made aware that we have a new interface. So I will be working on that, but that will be in April. Right after spring break, I will start that process for updating the guide. So you may have two versions for next year. If everyone transfers over to the newer interface, you will only have one, but I will make sure it's updated in both formats for next year. So right now we're going to create a behavior incident. So we're going to create that from detail. In incident management, you have discipline or truancy. I'm creating a discipline incident that occurred today at 11:26 during school hours. What kind of incident am I coding? Let's say a 009, which is fighting. You can add a description. This is that location field that is missing. When you see on that ADT report and you see a lot of locations, this is what is missing. We ask districts to make sure they populate this. So I can say that this fight happened in the hallway. I could put in the comments, hallway B, whatever is needed. And then that's the beginning of the incident. I have the actual incident date during school hours. Let's say right before class, because this happened in the hallway. All of these must be populated on your incident. They are required. Now I need to add the students who were involved in the fight. In order to add that student, I add the plus sign here. I'm just going to look for some students quickly. Okay. Hopefully there's some students here at the school. Okay. There's no school students at that school. This is our test server, so let's see. No records found. I need some students. So I may have to go back to the district level because there's no students in that file, or go to the old year. Let's see. Let's see if there's student in the old year at this school. I'm gonna do this quickly. Okay, let's see if we have some students. Okay, where are all the students? Okay. Had to find someone at the elementary school. I don't know where the high school students are, but this is our test server. So I'm grabbing a student. That's one. And because the student is the offender, I need to include the offender. then I need to go in and grab another student because you remember, as I stated, you can't fight alone. Add the offender, add the attribute. If this student was at another school, I would have added this, the attribute. But if they're at the same school, I don't need to add that. Unless there's a physical injury. So now I want to add the behavior of fighting. Remember, when you drag and drop on the name of the offender. You drag and drop on the name of the offender. Now we have 2 students that were fighting on this incident. So now I have to go in and add an action. Under your action, we're going to do a suspension. We find the suspension. This student is going to be out of school suspended, no services provided. The date is, they fought this morning. They're going to be suspended tomorrow. They're going to be suspended for what, 3 days? So the 23rd, 26th, and 27th are their suspension days. I got to it today. Their duration code is going to be 3. Their actual assign is 3. The actual days right now is 3. If I had to go back and change this to 1, I need to go back and change it to 1. And I would also need to go back and change this to 1 and change this to 1. But right now, this student is assigned 3. 3 days. All of these things must be populated on an incident. And that's for student 1. If I have to do this for the second student as well. Add the action again. There's a suspension. This student may be with services provided because this may be their 11th day. So 23rd through the 27th. Remember, I'm providing services during this time. And it's 3. And it's 3 here. And 3 here. The only time I changed this actual duration and the action dates and the duration date is when the assigned duration is reduced. And I have to go back into that incident and make that change. PowerSchool just doesn't do it on its own. Okay? So I've done that. So guess what? I have to drag and drop this on the behavior. You see the stair step? Drag and drop this on the behavior stair step. Right now, this is 1 incident of fighting, 2 students involved, with both students being suspended. And that's an incident. If we're counting the numbers for total numbers of students suspended, it's going to be 2 because you have 2 students that are suspended. If you're counting the number of total incidents of fighting, it's going to be 1 because it's 1 incident of fighting with 2 students involved. And then I would submit that incident. And for me to go in, and this is one example I said I was going to share, is that if I had to go in and correct the incident for the student that had an out of school suspension with services provided, and it was reduced down to 1 day, I have to go back in, click the edit button, This is going to be reduced to just 1 day. This is just an example now for demonstration purposes. Make sure you're following your school procedures. Put my resolution date. I don't know why that came off. Maybe I didn't put it there. I would go in and reduce. 1 day reflects 1 day. If you leave this information the same as 3 days, we will not get the change. I would update the action, and then I would submit and save. And that is reflected when we get your data during those nightly uploads by your district. Okay? So what if I had an incident on the bus? We're going to create an incident on the bus. Discipline. Time frame. During school hours. And this is on the bus, letting me know that this happened on the bus. Well, on this bus incident, we're going to say this student had a weapon, which is 789. On the action, remember that location, you must put bus. You can put in the description, student had a weapon on the bus, gun on the bus. You can put in a location, seat number 3. You can add all that information there. Then I'm going to find some more students again. I'm going to switch schools. You remember, can't find any students at one of these schools. I'll try to see. Oh, finally got a high school. Added, I'm going to add the student. The student is the offender. I'm going to add that information. And now I'm going to go get my behavior, which is a 789. Well, if I can get to the behavior, 789 there. And then because this is a gun, I have to add an object. Click on the weapon. Then I need to say what type of weapon it is, handgun, add that object, that's there. Then, because I must have an action as well on this incident, I'm going to add the action, which is suspension pending expulsion. So when you look in the system, it's pending expulsion. It happened today. The end date for this, I'm already going to the end of the school year. It may not be once it comes out, but this is a gun incident, and it's highly likely that the student is going to be suspended for the end of the school year. Most of the time, you're going to do 10 days here. Let me put it on the correct thing. 10 days. Most of the time, you're starting off with 10. But when the expulsion happens, it's usually till the end of the school year. So we have 10 days here. Why is it not on? Okay. Go back to February. That's your 10 days. That's usually what happens when you're doing the 10 days for the student here that's recommended for expulsion. So you see the 10 days is also here. Add this here. And this is going to be 10 right now because I haven't been to the hearing. So I have to drag and drop all of this. So I have to drag and drop the behavior. I have to drag and drop the object. But for this to count as a suspension, I have to drag and drop that on top of the behavior. This is correct. If you see your incident looking like this is correct. You don't have to do anything. Then I hit submit. So wait a couple weeks, guess what? We had the hearing. That means I need to go back into this incident. The hearing occurred. I need to go back to this incident and I need to add the final outcome. The final outcome for this incident is that this student is going to be expelled with services. So I need to go in, add, find my expulsion, and then I need to select with services. That hearing took place on the 7th of March. So I kept my 10 days. If it took place on the 8th, you would include that. This means this student is going to be expelled for the rest of the school year. So whenever your school ends, I'm just picking a date, no particular date. This is for training purposes. The date in which you had that hearing, it could be the 7th or 8th. These are just some made up dates for this time. The student is going to be expelled for the remainder of the school year. If it's semester portion, it would be the remainder of the semester. If it was at the beginning if it's the full 365 and they may be suspended until next year this time, well, you would go to 25 and you would match this up March 7th if it's that full 365. So this information should kind of match because that's for the remainder for the full 365 for a whole year. Because that's for an actual weapon such as a gun, you can be suspended up for an entire year. But if it was modified, you would need to use either the remainder of the school year, which would be until the end of the year, or until the end of the semester. But most cases, it's the full year. We have a few that's a little different. Here, you really can't put anything because it's really going to be that full year for this incident because this is a gun incident. And then because my final action is an expulsion with services provided, I have to take this, drag and drop it again on top of the behavior, and then hit submit. And this incident is final, but you make sure you update your attendance. Okay, so what we did there are a few of the things that we asked for during the call. We asked to make sure that we included an incident for a suspension pending expulsion, expelled with services, and we can do one with expelled without services as well. We did the bus suspension. We looked at the duration days for suspension. And let's do one with a physical injury of an aggravated assault. A good time. Any questions, Carolyn? Because I can't see anything other than the actual coding.
No, it's been pretty quiet in the chat.
Okay. So this next incident is going to be one with an aggravated assault. This is going to happen during the class. This is going to be one of those 510s. This going. And this is in the classroom. And I'm going to add a student. I'm going to find some students again. This is going to be the offender once again. I'm going to add another student. Then I am also going to add a victim. Because sometimes you may also have a victim on this incident. One incident is going to, in an aggravated assault, it depends on who did the assaulting. We have included usually the aggravated assault on the person who's caused the injury and not on the victim, because the victim is not where we pull information from. So when we look for that aggravated assault, and we add that this is an incident, and on this incident, both of them have caused injury, because we've had cases where both students were injured and had to be hospitalized, and they injured each other during this incident. So we want to make sure we cover that type too as well. So with that, because I have an aggravated assault, I have to go in on the student's name and make an edit. I have to go in and add an attribute. And I have to go in and add a physical injury. And I have to select whether it was major, moderate, serious. So this one was serious. And then I can tell what happened. And I can update that. For this student, because they had a serious injury as well, I would need to do the same thing. I would have to go in, add the physical injury. And this was a serious one as well, because both of them went to the hospital. And now I have to still go in and add the actual action. And on the action, they may be recommended for expulsion. But as I tell people, when you use the recommended for expulsion, it does not capture suspension days. So you would still need to go in and add the suspension. So it is very important. You might want to document recommended for expulsion, but I need the suspension days on any incident that's occurring in a school. So I'm going to just do suspension with no services provided, because the student is not a student with disability. If it is a student with disability, I would do make sure that I get those services, and then I would include that information. So I'm going to do one without and one with. And we're starting today. And it's going to be 10 days. So we're going with the 7th. I got to it today. It's 10 days. And 10 days should be here. And 10 days should be here. And I have to do this again. I wish it was an easier just copy, but that's not how it is in PowerSchool right now. So I'm gonna add that with services, click on the same dates here. Resolution date, which is today. Got to make sure we have our duration code, which is 10 days. We got to make sure we have the actual, assign and actual. And then I have to drag and drop. I've seen districts add the recommended for expulsion on these incidents. When I see a recommended for expulsion on your incident, it should give you a flag and level data. And hopefully I can show you where it is if it doesn't have a final outcome. Because you're going to say recommended for expulsion. Well, you recommended them today for expulsion. I'm not sure what y'all are adding here because I need the suspension days. So if you're recommending them for expulsion, it doesn't capture suspension days. It just lets us know that the student has been recommended for expulsion. This is what captures suspension days. The out of school suspension pending. Let me make sure that I put which I didn't click the right drop down for that one. This is the one that actually captures your suspension days. But when you're doing this, no services provided, you can't do the pending expulsion. So I know why you have the recommended days on there, but I have to have them both. You can't just put recommended for expulsion without putting the suspension days. It's just not possible because we won't be able to gather how many days a student was suspended for this incident. Okay? Let me put that back where I had it. It canceled.
Aveen, there is
Mhm.
one question in the chat that says, could you do a concurrent example?
Okay. Let's do the concurrent. We can submit this one. I gotta drag it. Okay. So with a concurrent, I'm gonna need 2 incidents. So I need to code a little quickly. So I may not talk through the whole thing because this is incident 1 that happened early during school hours before class. Let's give me something that's going to get you a suspension. Maybe having tobacco. Let me pull my code for tobacco. Want to make sure I'm following my own instructions here for my tobacco code. I like the codes because it's easier for you to see. The tobacco code is 230, and that's on page 42 of the guide. And this is before class. So this might have been in the restroom. The student was smoking a vape pen. This is just an example for coding. So picking the student. Trying to make this as quickly as possible. Go to my tobacco, which is 230. And this is a vape pen. When that vape pen does not have drugs in it, it can be a vape pen. If it has drugs in it, you have to move to the drug codes that we discussed earlier. So we have the behavior. Okay. This is behavior 1. Okay, I'm gonna submit it because we haven't gotten to the action yet. Okay, later on that day, the student has another behavior, maybe profanity in the classroom. So we're gonna create that real quick. In another classroom, another incident. I haven't gotten to the first one yet. So this is during the school hours, during the classroom. This is going to be profanity. Let me get my codes because I don't use that one as much. People use the weapons. They want me to code the weapons, so I'm going to use stuff that I don't use as often, which is 210 is the code. And then profanity. This is in the classroom. And one thing I should have done was actually kept my name for my student. I did not write the name down. So that's going to be interesting for me to find her again. I'm going to submit this. Don't follow me and do this. Okay. I need to get the student's name from the incident so I can make sure it's correct for the concurrent. Student name is Eden. And the school is 32. Eden. Just want to make sure I get the right student. It's not that school. Right there. Gonna add her to this as the offender. Okay. And this is going to be the code. The behavior is profanity. Okay. So, and I should have written down the code number as well. But this will be the one I would put the concurrent on. And the reason why the vape pen, the tobacco incident is the highest level. So I would go in here and add an action. Of suspension that is concurrent. And I know on the other incident, she is going to be suspended for 2 days. I can add that here, but I cannot put the 2 days here. I'm supposed to put the concurrent suspension. I can add the incident number here to say where she's going to be suspended. But what I cannot add a duration code of 2 days on this incident. I know that on the other incident, that's where I should complete all of this other information. These are the things that you should have here. You can put the dates. It's not going to cause us any issues because when we see a concurrent, that means the student is suspended someplace else. So I can grab this and put the profanity. I can grab this and put the action, and AV needs to make sure she grabs the code when she submits it. And I didn't grab the incident number. So I'm gonna go back to that incident and I'm gonna put the incident number on there. Because and then in the suspension comment, I would add that the student is suspended on incident number. And my incident number was 210666. And then I would update that action and submit. That tells us already. And then I have to go back here to the incident in which I am suspending her on for those 2 days that will cover this. It may be more in your policy. Remember, this is only for coding purposes as an example. Then I would go to this incident, which has the tobacco on there. And I'll make a quick edit. I'm going to make this the primary behavior. Update that, as I stated earlier. And then I'm going to add my my actual action, which is the suspension. And this is going to be suspension with no services. They are not at their 10 days. And it's going to be for 2 days, which is the 23rd through the 26th. And your resolution is today still. Your duration is going to be 2. You're going to put 2 here. You're going to put 2 here. And you can even include this suspension covers incident, whatever that incident number was. I didn't code it, but this is just an example. Whatever it is, I know it's a 66 something at the end, and add that. And now you drag and drop. And then you hit submit. When that comes to the State Department, we know that the student had 2 incidents on that day. One's going to come up to us as a concurrent, and one is going to come up to us as the suspension, and we're going to take the suspension. I know we're at 12:03. Hopefully, I've covered everything that you've asked of me, Carolyn, and for the schools that are attending the session. I don't want to go over your time too much, but hopefully I've covered the things that we discussed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so very much for doing this presentation for us this morning. I felt that it was vital for the SPED data managers or the folks on the special education data reporting side to know and understand what's involved with the ins and outs, the intricate moving parts as we transition to the Table 5 reporting being pulled directly from incident management. We do have a template that Albert is working on that we will send to you guys so that you'll be able to download your data, discipline data from PowerSchool and drop it into the template. It is macro based, so we do understand that some districts may not allow macros, but that is the tool that we are providing from the state for districts to be able to see how what their data would look like at the state level. And so we should be sharing that within the next coming weeks for you to be able to test your district data to see how and what it would look like when it comes to us at the state level. Aveen, there is one additional question in the chat, and it says, what type of role does the typical incident manager coordinator hold in a district that is in charge of this information? Are they in the IT department or maybe student services?
It's usually the student services person. Some districts have an incident management coordinator that works with the student services, but usually it's the student services director, and your IT folks always have access to it.
Thank you so very much for that. That is all of the questions. Our next monthly meeting will be March 21st at 10 a.m. We will resume our regular third Thursday meeting on March 21st. We do not have any data reports that is due where you're submitting to us. The next submission to us at the state will be April 12th. For the systemic verification check for indicators 7, 11, and 12. And hopefully we'll have more information, more detailed information to you about the final submission of your data collection from the Enrich system. We did include the monthly meetings teams information. It is always the same. Feel free to share this information, save it in your calendars as a reminder, but this will always be the login information for our monthly meetings. I think we've covered all the questions in the chat. This is our contact information. As always, if you have any questions for us or need additional clarification, or if you have a topic that you would like more information on, send us an email or place that in the chat. Thank you for your time this morning. And enjoy the rest of your day and have an awesome ending of the week.